My guest today is Gary Davis Jr., who is an accomplished operations and compliance executive with over 25 years of experience driving business growth. I know from firsthand experience that Gary has tremendous experience in helping clients with the ever-changing regulatory landscape in the wealth profession. Good morning, Gary, and thank you for joining our Wealth Compliance Leader Series.
Good morning, Parn. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Gary, you're a veteran in our regulatory and compliance industry when it relates to the wealth management sector, and you've worn many hats. As you can judge by the gray, you've had a storied career and various different journeys. Curious about what led to your interest in the wealth compliance sector.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. First, I definitely was not this gray when I started my career. Yeah, it's been an interesting career path. It goes all the way back to the summer between my junior and senior year of college when I did an internship at a life insurance general agency. And I realized at that point in time that my career in the investment advisor space wasn't going to be front-facing sales or more relationship client working directly with clients, but more internally. I actually have an undergraduate degree in financial planning, so that is why I was doing that internship that summer. I've been fortunate to work for some really, really good companies who've allowed me to get experience in different areas of the investment advisor space. My first entrance into compliance, while brief, was when I worked for my first RIA back in 1997. And I was working with one of the partners who was the COO and CCO. When I left there, I went to a local broker-dealer and became an operations manager and really started to get more involved in working with compliance and really driving an integration between compliance and operations. Left that firm and went to work for my second RIA and went to work for an individual who became a mentor to me in this industry. And I joined that firm in the year 2000 as the first time I held the CCO role. And was fortunate to work with some really great industry leaders who were the consultants at law firm that this firm used, and learned a tremendous amount about compliance, but not only about compliance, but the value and the need for compliance and operations to be integrated, and not just back office operations, but technology and HR and business development and client service. All of that has a marketing communications, obviously. All of that obviously has a compliance aspect to it from an SEC perspective. So I learned a tremendous amount there. Left and started becoming a consultant and worked for a very prominent consulting. I had my own consulting firm for a number of years that I built from the ground up. I did compliance and operations and business management consulting to RIAs, and then merged that firm in with a prominent compliance and consulting firm and law firm, and spent a few years there, and then went back, what I call going back into private practice, went back internal as COO and CCO for an RIA. And then unfortunately left that firm and was in consulting briefly for the past about year and a half. But I wasn't drawn to compliance. It wasn't something I sought out. But because I was very focused on the operations side of the business and learning how to run advisory firms and what it takes, compliance was a natural fit for me to explore, excuse me, and to get involved in. And I've enjoyed it. A lot of people like, oh my gosh, how can you deal with all that, deal with compliance work every day. And it's, it's just a part of my way of being from a professional perspective. Because again, running advisory firms, when I'm looking at an issue, I'm not just looking at the issue from a business perspective, but I'm also looking at it from a regulatory risk perspective, as well as a business risk perspective or a brand identity risk, whatever it is. But I always look at things with at least one of my lenses, looking at it from a regulatory compliance standpoint, as again, everything in a wealth advisory firm, every action, everything that you do on a day-to-day basis, there's a compliance aspect to it.
Love it, love it. I tell you, Gary, just about everybody I've spoken with on our series here has sort of had a similar type of journey, in a sense that, you don't naturally think that, hey, I'm gonna, people take financial planning certifications and courses and paths into, investment management, and compliance isn't necessarily, from what I've heard, a direct path that somebody seeks out. But it's so fascinating because compliance touches on so many important aspects of the wealth management practice, to your point, ops, technology, risk management, brand that it's such a pivotal role, and it requires, sort of stating the obvious, a strategic thinker. Now, you touched on a few things related to, embracing regulations and embracing sort of that or mitigating the regulatory risks of the business. One of the questions that comes to mind is, over the past, I want to say 2-3 years, and how we came to know each other, Gary, was through the Department of Labor's Prohibited Transaction Exemption 2020-02. Given that you worn all these different hats, whether you're a chief compliance officer or providing advice in a consulting capacity, what would you say to firms who are sort of seeing all these emerging regulations come to a head?
Yeah, I would say, in terms of trying to understand like what's coming down the pike, what's happening, how are firms dealing with all of these different types of regulations. I mean, there's just there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of access to data coming at you. I had to tell you for myself, I am on LinkedIn every day throughout the day, looking at posts from industry periodicals, from webinars, posts that regulatory compliance consulting firms and law firms are posting. That is a great place to find information on what is happening in the advisor space, how firms are dealing with regulatory compliance, new rules that may or may, that are new proposed rules and where they stand, new rules that are now being implemented, and what firms are doing. That's a great place to get data. The SEC website is obviously full of data. I'm on that website every day as well. Obviously they issue out risk alerts. Those, could be once every few months. It could be once a month. It depends on, what the SEC is seeing and what they want to be communicating to the industry. Priority memos, that comes out, the beginning of every year. That's a great tool. But the press release page, that is a page that I look at on a daily basis. That is where the SEC is using their bullhorn and letting the industry know this is what we're doing to certain individuals or firms in the industry for violating the requirements. That is a great resource to use to understand. Again, I think everybody just saw was yesterday or Monday. Unfortunately, a few more firms have been caught up in the electronic communication sweep that were fined for violating books and records and not maintaining electronic communications. So those are great resources, and conferences. Obviously they're not as on demand as what I just described, but conferences are really great as well to interact with colleagues, get to know what other firms are doing. If you're a CCO or a compliance or operations person, there's a handful of networking groups or working groups within our industry. Some of the custodians have them. There's some standalone groups. They're great as well to network and ask, just throw questions out there. How is your firm handling this and handling that? That's an invaluable resource, is being able to speak to other firms and say, hey, how is, this is the issue I'm coming up against. How is your firm handling it? What are you doing? And by the way, it's not going to be, most likely, it's not going to be a plug and play. Oh, you're doing it that way? Oh, I'm going to do it that way as well. It's not a plug and play, but it starts the juices flowing in terms of, oh, okay, I see what they're doing. I could take this aspect of what they just said, and then I can then massage it to my firm's needs, and then improve policy, implement policy, and make improvements in the day-to-day management of the compliance program.
Love it, Gary, and I totally agree in that power of the sort of the peer network is truly valuable when it comes to embracing new regulations. And one other piece that's sort of coming down the pike, I guess, is the rewrite of the fiduciary rule, and we're sort of watching that file very closely.
Everybody is. There's a handful of proposed rules that we all know the SEC has out right now between fiduciary, custody, cybersecurity. It's going to be an interesting several months once these proposed rules come out of comment and the SEC makes a decision, what that decision is going to be, because I think it's going to be a material change if some of these new requirements are going to be put into place. It's going to be a material change, and it's my view it's going to make advisors, it's just going to become much more difficult for advisors to be able to do what's in their client's best interest and support their clients. Again, that's just my feeling.
So, Gary, let me ask you this. You touched on sort of new emerging regulations that are sort of in the proposal stage. You've talked about kind of your career, having worked in ops and, deploying technologies. You've seen our technology when it comes to the Department of Labor's sort of fiduciary requirements on forwarded transaction 2020-02. What role do you think technology plays holistically within our space? So wealth managers have their day-to-day operations, and then suddenly you've got these compliance requirements coming in. Where do you see technology sitting in that mix?
Yeah, it's got to sit side by side. It really, really does. Whether it's regulatory requirements, to your point, for PTE 2020-02, it is monitoring, your conflicts of interest, mitigating insider trading, your gifts and entertainment, your political contributions, personal security transaction reviews, outside business activities. There's so much and that's just, I'm just scraping the surface of just the code of ethics right there. But there is just so much that needs to be reviewed and monitored from a compliance perspective, and obviously taking advantage of technology that's a right fit for your firm, and that is just so important. There's a lots of different vendors and technology out there today. Just because one firm, two firms, both $1 billion in AUM, just because one firm uses technology X doesn't mean that other firm should also use technology X. It may not be the right fit because of the way they're running their business, the way they've implemented their compliance program, the budget that they have. Okay. Budget is something that empowerment, this, you hear this all the time. Oh, I would love to implement this technology. We just don't have the budget for it. Unfortunately, I do think that firms are a little short-sighted at times when they're talking about not having the budget, because I don't think they're really looking at the total ROI and looking at the time saving. Okay. The time saving, the risk mitigation. What is that worth? when they're looking at that ROI and making those decisions. So I think, the implementation of technology when it comes to these material changes in requirements of the Advisors Act, there's technology out there that can make your compliance program easier to supervise and manage, easier to roll out to your staff, and it's easier for your staff to understand what the requirements are and to comply with the requirements. These, to me, are just all no-brainers.
Love it, love it. Love the side-by-side analogy, and I couldn't agree with you more. And so let me ask you one of my favorite questions. We started off the top by sort of getting to know your background and the phenomenal journey you've had in the industry, all the different sort of sides of the business, the wealth management business you've touched. Then we talked a little bit about kind of this never-ending battle of newer and newer emerging regulations, and then now we've talked about technology. If Gary had this magic wand, a way to sort of wave that wand and better the industry collectively, what would you do with that, Gary?
Yeah, I would say that, I would like to see more technology that is integrated and works across the spectrum. I'm a big fan in all-in-one back office systems. So portfolio accounting, billing, trading, order management, CRM, having a system that is fully integrated in a back office for a firm instead of just separate systems that aren't talking or maybe talking to each other through, imports, exports. I think on the RIA side, I would love to see firms look at building out more of an all-in-one that handles the PTE, that handles Reg BI, that handles all of the code of ethics, that handles marketing communications, your compliance calendar, your compliance training, your compliance program, your compliance testing, everything that it takes to manage and run, having a single system, your electronic communications reviews and social media, having a single system. There is that one single system does not, to my knowledge, does not exist today. And if it does, it may exist in firms that have, $3, $4, or $5, million budgets to be able to either build out or implement those systems. But from a cost-effective day-to-day standpoint for your day-to-day RIA, I don't think that exists. And I would love to see the industry, and the industry has done a great job at expanding the technology. But I'd like to see a little more, all-in-one sort of system that makes the management of the compliance program. And by the way, that integrates in with your back office systems. Those, I'm going to be a broken record here. You don't want to make sure that you don't implement technology that does, on a compliance side, that does not interact or speak with your back office systems, okay? If you do that, you're going backwards, okay? Because again, compliance, operations, technology, client services, business development, whatever it is that's going on in your RIA, there is a compliance aspect to it.
Love
so
it. Love
if
it.
I had that magic wand, that's what I would do. I'm not a technology person, so I don't know how to build all that, but I can just, as I look like Santa, I can just put it on a wish list.
Love it, Gary, and I love the passion, and I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, at the end of the day, the purpose of technology is to scale the ability of that business to do what it's doing, right? So if you can get this, best of breed or all-in-one tech stack, it makes doing business and complying with regulations that much easier. So, which is the intended purpose of the technology piece. So, Gary, thank you very much for your phenomenal insights. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Hopefully we get a chance to do this again.
Thanks, Parham. It's been a joy, and I appreciate it. You guys are doing a great job at being a thought leader out here in the industry and getting the word out about how to effectively manage compliance programs. So thanks so much for your efforts that you're doing.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you again for joining us today. If you liked today's conversation, give us a like. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and various podcast channels for more Wealth Compliance Leaders episodes.